I did full-time employees, so looking at how can they more effectively use. So I did do a little bit of research and those special skills.
Stop the press. This isn't another top 9 ways on how to be a wonderful, engaging, charismatic, strong, stable, genius leader show. No.
Can you tell me where that one is, though? Because I'd quite like to watch it.
We'll put a link in the description.
This is #Crosstalk from Questback. No further interruptions, please.
Sorry.
In good old military fashion, having completed the last covert black operation, back from the wild wests of the corporate world, we have the Special Forces here today. Major General Luke Tolbert.
Good to see you.
Commander Nicola Matson.
Aye. Oh, wrong armed force. Sorry.
It's okay.
Colonel Scott Hayhoe.
Hello.
And Admiral of the Fleet, myself, Martin Rover Parks. So, in these scary times of digitalisation, automation and right-sizing, we're going to talk about 3 things today. Why you need more leaders, not fewer. How you can make leaders successful at their first level of incompetence, the Peter Principle. And why it's not about how many people you lead, it's about how many follow you. So, in the previous episode, we spoke about flattening hierarchies, which means fewer managers, perhaps none. I love the sound of that.
Watch it.
Right.
But yet now we're saying we need more leaders, not fewer. Right, what's going on here? Nicola, help us out.
Well, actually, Nicola, just before you start, reminds me, I used to work in a leadership shop.
Oh, God.
It was called Pret à Manager.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I apologise for all of those watching and listening. Although, actually, funny play on words, but I think it's actually quite important to differentiate between a manager and a leader. I think those 2 terms are often used interchangeably. And whilst there are many leaders, in fact, in organisations that have a more traditional hierarchy, probably most leaders have managerial responsibility. Actually, the roles are quite different. There's lots of definitions out there. One that I picked up that I thought was quite nice and quite succinct is that a manager's job is to plan, organise and coordinate, whilst a leader's job is to inspire and motivate. And maybe put another way, leaders have people that follow them, managers have people that work for them. So you're right, as organisations get flatter, there will naturally be fewer people that have people management skills or responsibilities, but that doesn't mean that you will have, or indeed should have, fewer leaders in your organisation.
Yeah, and I think as every CEO knows, the people at the top of the business, the senior management team, can't possibly know as much about the business or the customers as the people on the ground. And increasingly these days, you can't really rely on chains of command and control to help the business think quickly, move quickly and change quickly. So businesses do need people at every level to make decisions, and therefore businesses do need leaders at every level.
Right, so I get that. But does that mean everyone's a leader then? Because that sounds pretty crazy, and I know we push the boundaries on Crosstalk, but Luke, let's bring some sense back to this.
Well, I think actually what Scott and Nicola have said is absolutely right. And if you think about that difference between leaders and managers, not everybody has the opportunity to manage in an organisation. In fact, not everybody wants to manage, and we'll come on to that next. But if we actually go back to that definition that you gave, Nicola, which is that leaders inspire and motivate, everybody has an opportunity, or should have an opportunity in an organisation, to do that to the people around them, and particularly at times of adversity or change.
And if you think back to the previous Crosstalk where we talked about organisational structures, and we talked a lot about this concept of team of teams and cross-functional teams, if you think about those cross-functional teams, they have somebody that leads them, but often that individual has no management responsibilities over the people in the team. And actually, for the team to be successful, it does need that leader role. I'm trying to say team one more time in that sentence.
Right, so we've got time cracking on here.
Does time crack on? Sorry, I just want to be clear about that.
It does in Martin's world.
Does
But a
in
lot of
Martin's
things happen
world.
in Martin's world.
Martin's world is a very special place.
Yeah, we know.
So with time moving swiftly on, Scott, we promised our audience to tell them a little bit about the Peter Principle. Our resident historian, fire away.
Thank you very much. Well, this was something that a professor, I think, called Lawrence Peter uncovered in 1969. And he did a study, and he concluded that people people are often promoted to their first level of incompetence. What this really means is that if somebody does a great job, then there's always a temptation to promote them to the next level up, where maybe they don't have the skills that are required. And just to bring that to life a little bit, let's imagine a computer programmer, very good at writing computer programs, got great skills in that kind of area. Somebody comes along and thinks, that's great, let's make you a team leader, put you in charge of a bunch of programmers. But actually the skills for being a team leader or manager are very different, and there's every opportunity there to fail.
Yeah.
So turning to you, Luke, how prevalent is this?
Well, actually, amazingly, counterintuitively, in fact, for Crosstalk, I don't have a stat that directly measured this.
Wow.
In fact, I kind of question whether that's indeed possible, to something like this. I mean, how many people would respond to any kind of research that asks, how good are you at your job? I'm not very good at my job. So maybe a direct measurement of that is a bit hard to come by. There might be some other sort of research that infers that, or where we can infer that. But just anecdotally, I mean, I am absolutely positive that we've all worked for managers or for people directly who seem fairly incompetent at what they do.
Absolutely not here.
Yeah, well, precisely.
Really? I thought you were going to say here. I mean, Luke's your manager, right?
I was choosing my words very carefully.
Sorry, Luke.
So I would hazard a guess that it's actually probably quite common.
There is actually a way in which you can measure just how successful a leader is in a role, and hence the name in some respects, objectives, because an objective gives you an objective view on somebody and how they're performing. Now, CEB a couple of years ago did a study on this, and what they found is that nearly half of leaders who make a move, whether that's a promotion or to a different division or a different country, for example, nearly half of leaders fail to meet their new objectives, their new KPIs in that role, and that's half of the leaders.
Yeah, that's much higher than I would have expected.
Yeah, indeed.
Wow. So, we now know the difference between managers and leaders. We know that individuals get promoted to their first level of incompetency, and that all sounds like a really big problem. So, what can businesses do about it? Scott, back to you.
Well, think of that new team leader that I mentioned. Give them a little while in the role, a few weeks maybe, or a month or something like that, and then get them to self-evaluate on their leadership skills. And importantly, get their team members to evaluate on the same skills base as well. And any gaps that you get between the two will give you either a hidden strength, where actually the leader is better at something than they think, or a blind spot where they think they're doing okay at something and their team members all think, well, actually not. Now, if you've got a gap that you can measure, then you can do something about it. You can take a collective action to help that new team leader to improve, and therefore actually become competent at their first level.
Brilliant.
Just a slight, just on a slight tangent there. I think the type of leadership evaluation that Scott talks about is extremely important and actually essential to really help leaders be more successful in their roles. But what if people no longer aspire to be leaders? And the only reason I say that is I was reading an article last week by a lady called Sally Helgeson, who's a leadership development consultant in the US. She goes to a lot of colleges or universities for those in the UK, and speaks about leadership to those graduates or upcoming graduates. And she was struck by the number of graduates that actually proactively came up to her to tell her that they did not want to be a leader. And that seems very much at odds with what we know businesses are doing. We know businesses are trying to hire leaders. There was some research conducted on behalf of the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and they found that 93% of employers who were hiring graduates placed a top priority on skills like critical thinking, ability to make complex decisions, ethical judgment, ability to communicate, this whole raft of skills that are basically core leadership skills. And they actually rated those as more important than the subject that the graduates studied and the grades that they got. So potentially we've got this slight issue where we've got businesses knowing they need to hire leaders, but we've got a new generation of workers coming into the workforce who are saying that they don't want to be a leader.
Nicola, I think that's a fascinating point. I want to put another spin on that and look at it from the angle of perhaps Sally's findings are that the graduates still have this perception of leaders being at the top of the organisation,
yeah, I'm sure
with lots of people just reporting into them.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing here a lot of the themes from previous Crosstalk starting to all come together as well. We've got the millennials and younger generations who maybe have a different perception of hierarchies and actually want to see how they can progress through an organisation. The hierarchy is going to get in the way of that. We're also seeing this idea of teams where there's less hierarchy, a flatter organisation, and it I think the findings go to show just how widespread this confusion between the word leader and manager actually is. The fact is, you don't have to have aspirations to be the CEO, to get on this ladder, to join the corporate climb, in order to be a fantastic leader.
Yeah, and an example of that actually is if you think about a call centre or a contact centre, something approaching a third of team leaders there are actually quite happy to stay at the level that they're at. So they're quite happy to manage a team of people, manage the calls, all very productive, everybody gets on, and that's as far as they want to go. Now, of course, that's great for them, but what they're doing as well is they're blocking people in their team who might have those aspirations. So, you do get blockers in organisations as well like that.
Yeah, and also just to lead on from that call centre manager who doesn't want to be promoted, I'm sure there are many well-documented cases. I mean, I'm thinking about people, for instance, in the medical profession who are fantastic doctors, and just because they've been a doctor for a certain amount of time, they suddenly find themselves managing a practice, 5 or 6, 7, 8 doctors underneath them, and they find themselves increasingly removed from the jobs that they trained for, that they loved doing, that actually they really wanted to do. And you see that quite often, actually, people no longer enjoying work because they're not doing their job anymore.
No, that's right. I remember somebody 10 years ago, actually, they were, quite rightly, they were promoted. They were ahead of, at the time they got promoted, had richly deserved promotion. And after 4 weeks, this person said, look, can I have my old job back? Because I've actually moved further away from the customers, from the engineering teams, and that's what I love doing. So, thanks for the offer, but I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think, I was just going back to that Peter principle, and it talks about being promoted to the first level of incompetence, which suggests that actually they don't have the skills to be successful in that role that they're promoted into.
Makes it sound bad, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it might actually be a case of it's not that they don't have the right skills, but they don't enjoy the job, they get no sense of job satisfaction, and we know if people don't like the job that they're in, then they're less likely to be top performers in it.
I think that's a really key takeaway.
Yeah.
If I had a pen, I'd make a note of it. So, question 3. Thank you.
Don't leave with that pen, Martin.
For those of you listening to the podcast, I just handed Martin a pen.
Right. So, question 3 was about how many people you lead, but how many actually follow you. So, we all know, for example, I've got way more followers than all of you on Instagram and Facebook.
That's assuming that you haven't paid for them.
Yeah, and you haven't looked at my private accounts, Martin.
I think your private account is probably for another Crosstalk, maybe an out-of-hours Crosstalk.
Or rather, should we talk about that? No, quick Crosstalk.
Terrific. So, Nicola, sensitively back to you then. How do you ensure people follow you?
I think clearly there are different styles of leadership, and that potentially means there are different ways that you can ensure as a leader that your employees follow you. I personally like to work with leaders that have a more transformational or a participative style of leadership. But actually, I think across all the different styles of leadership, a key skill that leaders need is communication, and that probably sounds a bit basic. But I think a lot of leaders fail because of poor communication. I'm sure I'm not the only one listening or watching the video that stood in front of a leader as they espouse this stream of cliches about how we're going to do more with less, and customer satisfaction is what it's about. We need to focus on our key priorities. And they may very well know what that means in their own head, but that's actually quite a vague, ambiguous way to communicate to your managers and your employees, and it can lead people to confusion where they don't know what they're expected to do. So I think if leaders communicate very well, both implicitly with their behaviours, it's not just about what we say, but how we act, but also explicitly in that they very clearly and simply explain their strategy and their vision, then I think that can really motivate, align and galvanise employees to follow them. And, I'm a huge Obama fan, but just think about his inauguration speech. I defy anyone to listen to that and not feel absolutely enthused and motivated and want him to be successful. And I think that's what a good leader does.
Yeah, exactly. And I think on the subject of inspiration, motivation, I'm also a massive fan of Obama, his inaugural speech, and those that followed also.
But his speeches, right?
I'm going to let people interpret that the way they want to. But yeah, going back to the buying Instagram followers sort of joke there, but it's if we follow that analogy, I think there might be something in that. There are probably people listening to this who are in a leadership position where they think, well, actually, I'm telling people what to do. I'm saying what the direction is. I'm putting it very clearly, and it's just up to people to follow, right? Yeah. That's what they've got to do. That's what I'm paying them for. I'm giving them money to do this, so they should basically be doing what we say. And actually, I think if we follow the Instagram followers sort of example, sure, you can pay people, you can give them money and they might click, and in the same way you can give them money and they might sign and join your company. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be there for a long time. If they don't like what they see, if they don't find that particularly inspirational, motivational, and if they see a lack of direction or leadership, then at best they're going to be unproductive, and at worst they're just going to leave.
Yeah. Good point, Luke. So, right, quick curveball. I was watching BBC On Demand, Rogue Traders, with my peppermint tea, no avocado smoothie that time, and found myself thinking about rogue managers and what destruction they cause. So, Scott, as a rogue managers, what are they?
I must admit, I was getting a little bit lost in that previous conversation. I'm not even sure I know what Instagram is, but anyway.
Well, it's like a telegram, but quicker.
Oh, right, okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm still waiting for my telegram from the Queen for my 100th birthday.
Which, in case you missed it, was last week.
One thing I do know about, though, is rogue managers, because as Nicola was saying, a leader is there to set direction, to inspire, to motivate, and it's up to the managers to get the job done. Now, a rogue manager is somebody that heads off in their own direction, maybe takes their team with them, and isn't really delivering against those KPIs, those objectives, the business, and they will undermine your business by becoming a rogue manager. So they really are a high risk to your profitability and your revenues and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this rogue manager piece is exactly where this lead, follow, or just get out of the way comes in, which I think we put in the promotion for this crosstalk. And I think it's really important. If you're not leading and you're not necessarily following, then you're doing the third one, which is you're being disruptive. You're actually leading. You might be even acting as a blocker to the people you manage, which is going to be frustrating, lead to retention issues, as you've mentioned. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. What about all the compliance issues and other things that might go on, and eventually your company strategy just doesn't succeed? So I was actually listening as a quick anecdote on this one. I read an interview with the CEO. I don't know who the CEO is. It's unfortunate, but I'll put the link to the interview in the description for this podcast and video. But he was basically saying that he started a company. He was the CEO and founder. The company grew really well, and then started after a few years to stagnate a little bit, not grow so fast. And he took a step back and realized, okay, well, I'm not really leading us in the direction. I don't really have that in me anymore. I don't have that innovative drive to do this. And also, I'm not really following, so I'm pretty much in the way. And he took the very difficult decision to actually step down or step to one side. And I think that's a really good sign of leadership. If you're not doing leading, you're not following, there's a third option.
I think with that particular example, whoever that person was, it showed a great degree of self-awareness and humility to actually do that. But I think, unfortunately, that probably is quite rare. And I think if you truly do have a rogue manager and you've tried everything in your power to bring them back in line, but they're resistant to that change, unfortunately, the risk to the business is so great that I think you don't really have a choice but to manage them out of that role, or potentially even out of the organisation if they're not the right fit for that business.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's where that need for real, genuine leadership is important, when those really difficult decisions do need to be made. Right, well, we have absolutely no fake news here. We are about to run out of time, but quickly before we finish, let's go around the table and get those final takeaways. Chicken korma, please. Sorry. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. What should businesses do, Nicola?
Well, this might sound a little bit pedestrian, but I think you need to make sure that the people in your business that are in leadership and management positions are the right people.
No way.
Wow, ding, ding, ding.
Nailed it.
So wow, no need for crosstalk.
Everyone's glad they listened for 14 minutes for that little nugget of wisdom, but if I could just finish, we've talked about that Peter principle and the fact that people are regularly promoted to that first level of incompetence. I don't particularly like that expression, but anyway. And I think what we can do to make sure you've got the right people in the right roles is extend those leadership evaluations so that you're not just looking at people already in those roles, but you're looking at the people that you're planning to promote into those roles. And it allows them and the business to see if they've got the right skills and attributes and behaviours to be successful. And if they haven't, and there are gaps, as Scott talked about, it allows them time to address those so that they're more likely to succeed in that role.
Yeah. Excellent, thanks, Nick. Luke, over to you.
Well, I think actually following on from Nick's point, I think it's absolutely insane that, and if we look at this difference between leadership and management, you don't have to have people underneath you or working for you directly, reporting into you, to be a leader. It's insane that every leadership evaluation that I think I've ever seen implemented is directly targeting people who are in management roles, people who have people reporting to them. And I guess that makes sense if you think about the structure of traditional leadership evaluations. But what we've seen traditionally is that that's focusing just on the creme de la creme, the very top of the organisation. In the last few years or the last several years, it started to actually extend out to most management positions within the organisation. But actually, what we are starting to see is organisations deploy self-service tools to managers and anyone in the organisation, indeed, so that everyone can have the opportunity, they're empowered to actually assess their own leadership skills and develop them anytime they want, whenever they want.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you, Luke. Last but definitely not least, Scott, what are your thoughts?
Thanks very much. I think that a lot of promotions happen because people will take a look at an individual's past achievements, their experience, and so it's kind of looking backward and they've done really well, it's time to promote them. Sometimes people will take a formal route and they'll do psychometric assessments, for example, which get us underlying abilities and so on. But I think, as we mentioned earlier on, a third thing to add to that, to complete the picture really, I suppose, and as Nicola said, do it before they get promoted, is to get them to do a self-evaluation. Get members of their team around them to do an evaluation as well, look at the gaps and close the gaps. And why not think about closing those gaps just before or as part of the onboarding for that promotion, for that new role.
Terrific. Thank you, Scott. So I think what we're really saying here is one point just really well articulated by three people.
Thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it's good that we're all aligned.
A massive thanks to our listeners, as always, for tuning in. A very big thanks to Luke Musk-Talbot.
That's Musk, obviously, from Elon Musk, my hero.
Nicola Merkel-Matson.
I do love her.
Scott Churchill-Hayhoe.
Well, I think I want an M. How about Montgomery?
Well, we've got Martin Mandela, Rover Parks.
Very good.
That's a batch of leaders. So until the next episode, check out on YouTube for all the previous episodes, iTunes and Google Play for our American friends. And, of course, we love feedback, so give it to us, just your thoughts. Join the debate at questback.com. Until next time, thank you.